Welcome to another exciting episode of Qvest Talk, where we delve into the intricacies of user experience and interface design. Today we're immersing ourselves in the dynamic realm of UX/UI. We'll be exploring the various roles and responsibilities within this field. Jonathan, thanks for being with us today. Our topic of this episode is user experience and interface design, and you're an expert on this field, so it's great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Please explain yourself what specific roles and responsibilities you take on in this field.
Yeah, of course. I'd like to take a step back first and go into my background a little bit. My background's in communications, so I don't have the typical design background. And with that background, I started to understand very early on that communication is something that goes so much further than language, than what's being said. And as I moved more into the software field, I understood that communication is also a vital part of software development and design. Anything a user does with the software communicates something. If it's easy and efficient to use, that sends a message. If it's not easy and inefficient to use, that also sends a message. And so now my role with Qvest is to communicate that understanding to customers, to potential customers, to partners, and of course also to keep myself up to date by engaging with other experts in the field on a regular basis, by monitoring the market, because it's such a vivid field. So much is happening and exciting things are happening. And so I constantly try to stay up to date and to identify opportunities for both us and our customers.
Let's stay right there. You already mentioned the importance of staying up to date. What are the latest, the current trends, and how have they changed over the past few years?
I think there's a few trends that are on everyone's minds right now. If you look into the field, you constantly hear artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, natural language processing. And these are things that are very exciting from a technological point of view. But I think more than anything, what companies need to be most aware of is just the rise of software solutions as a whole. There's so many new things, new developments, and in return, new software solutions popping up everywhere. And with that increase and with that technological development, user expectations are also constantly rising and rapidly developing. And so perhaps when it was okay 20, 30 years ago for a software solution to merely function on a technological base, that's not enough anymore. Users expect software to work. It's out of the question. Like, we don't waste a thought into the functionality of software anymore. What users now expect is that it is pleasant to use, that it sends a positive message back to them in terms of how they work with it, that it satisfies their needs, but more important than that, that it excites them, that it delights them, and that they have a positive experience using software solutions.
I would like to talk more about software development, which is one of your core topics. Why is good software design important? And what are the benefits of a good software design?
The benefits start with the users themselves. If you have a well-designed software solution, as I said, that sends a message to the user. It allows them to work efficiently. It reduces error rates. It reduces effort that you have to put into training. Ultimately, that reduces costs for companies and organizations, because it's just so much more intuitive. In return, if you don't put much thought into these things, or if you badly design something, users get frustrated. I think all of us don't really have to think too far into the past to remember an instance where we tried to do a very simple task with software and we couldn't figure out how to do it. we couldn't find the correct button. And this seemingly trivial task that we had to do that we've only planned a few minutes for suddenly became this huge thing. We got frustrated. The rest of the day was ruined. We might have had to do overtime, spend less time with our families. And that's obviously very bad for business if that's a regular occurrence of your software solution that you're providing. And so bad design is bad for business. Good design is good for business. And I'd like to raise the point that if you look at the market and if you look at successful software and as you look at successful digital products, none of them are badly designed. They're all well designed.
Yes. What typical challenges do companies have to face when they want to improve their UX design?
It starts with knowing who your users actually are. You need to understand who uses your software on a daily basis. You need to understand what are their needs, their expectations. What do they do on a daily basis, and how does your software solution come into the mix? And perhaps even more challenging is to interpret these insights correctly and to translate them correctly into your software. It's not enough to just merely have a list of insights about those are your users, that's what satisfies them, that's what delights them, that's what they do on a daily basis. It's then also doing the correct next steps in order to implement that into your solution. And that can often be quite challenging for organizations to do.
And how do you do that as a company? Are there proven methods, proven techniques that you can apply to achieve this goal?
Yeah, I think it starts with where your priorities as an organization lie. You need to make user experience design a high priority, and you need to prioritize it at the very beginning of your product development cycle. And you also need to understand that companies are very good at what they do. A software company is good at developing software. They've identified an issue on the market. They've come up with an idea how to tackle that issue. What companies might not be experts in is all those user experience design aspects that play into software development. And so by prioritizing it at the very beginning of your product development cycle, you also need to bring in the appropriate knowledge. You need to bring in experts that will help you with, first of all, getting to know your users, understanding what they are, what they need, what they want, what excites them, as I said before. But they will then also be able to help you implement those insights. And they will be able to help you to design and develop a user-centric software by then applying a whole bunch of methods that they've got in their little toolkit, and by choosing an appropriate design process and appropriate methods.
Do you have one example for a specific method?
One of the most commonly used methods that I think a lot of us already know is creating personas.
Yeah.
Which in essence means you've gathered insight about your pool of users and you see similarities between a bunch of users. And what you then do is you, in essence, put a face to those insights. You understand one group of my users typically faces these challenges. They typically come from these backgrounds. They typically within this certain age bracket have these kind of interests, these kind of challenges on a daily basis, and have this style of working. And you collect that insight, you translate them into personas, depending on who you are as a company. A software might have a very diverse pool of users, which then means there might be quite a large number of personas. In other situations, you might have a smaller pool of personas, but it just helps you to really put the user at the forefront of your development and to develop and design with that persona in mind, ensuring that you don't just develop something, but that you develop something that your users will be happy with.
You mentioned that a lot of people know the concept of personas and are aware of it, but why do companies still not focus on that topic yet?
I think it is playing into what I've said before, just wrong priorities. I think oftentimes companies can get carried away with their experience and with their knowledge. And there's nothing wrong in being confident with the knowledge and the skills that you as a company have, as an organization have. What companies often don't prioritize is that there's a human in between them and the software. Yeah. You don't develop a technology for anyone, for anything. You develop for humans. And then I think it goes back to what I've said at the very beginning. Those humans, or users as we call them during this conversation, they don't expect for software to work anymore because it's just such a given. They don't ask, does this actually work? What they do ask is, how does it benefit me? Mm-hmm. And how do I use it? How do I work with it? And so as a company, as an organization develops software that might be brilliant from a technological point of view, but doesn't really prioritize the user, it's of little effect. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so that's something that companies need to understand. We don't just develop technologies anymore. We develop experiences. Mm-hmm. And these experiences come through technology. But in order to take that step further, you need to prioritize your users. You need to understand this is an experience. This is something that our users have to deal with every single day. And it's not enough that it just works. It needs to work well, and it needs to communicate a positive experience, a positive feeling to the user. Mm-hmm. And that starts with priority.
Do you have an example or a use case from your personal experience where all these things worked out, like a great successful project or an interesting way or exciting way to get to a success?
Of course. One project that always stuck with me is when we worked with the independent patient consulting service in Germany, which is an organization that helps patients to work through healthcare and health law related questions. So they have a problem. They're able to come in for a conversation, either in one of their locations or over the phone. And as you might imagine, there's a lot of sensitive topics being discussed there. And consultants, trying to be good consultants, they want to focus on the patient. They want to give them their full attention. But as it is the case in any organization, these conversations also need to be documented in one way or the other. And at the time, they've worked with a quite inefficient solution in terms of documentation. There was a software that was very stale and basically required them to put their entire cognitive effort into documenting if they wanted to do it well. That quickly led into them ditching the software and documenting those conversations on paper, so they could still focus on the patients entirely. So they go through the day, they have 6, 7, 8 conversations throughout the day, document them with pen and paper. It gets close to finishing time, and they've got this stack of reports that they then have to manually put into the software. You can imagine how motivated they were to do that. It often meant they had to do overtime just to finish their reports. It meant that certain pieces of information they didn't ask in the conversation, so that the reports weren't complete. The data quality wasn't the best. Reports were abbreviated. Just because I think all of us understand you don't really want to get to the end of the day and delay you coming home because you then have to do this admin work. And so we sat in with them. We tried to understand the consultants. We tried to understand how they work and what their challenges and expectations were. And together with them, we built a custom-made solution that didn't have the most flashy interface, that wouldn't win an award for the most beautiful interface design, because that wasn't important. what was important for them was a flexible solution that helped them to document their conversations on the side whilst leading that conversation. And in essence, it meant that we built a form for them that didn't have a certain order it needed to be filled out with. It had all the information the consultant needed to gather from the patient. And then by using keyboard shortcuts, the consultants were able to go into a certain field and then enter that piece of information. Mm-hmm. So let's say the conversation progressed, the patient offered a certain piece of information that was important for the report. They put in the keyboard combination, went to the entry field, entered the information, and could keep going with the conversation. Then the conversation went on. The patient offered another piece of information that was at a completely different place within the form, but because of the keyboard combination, they could go there immediately without having to scroll, without having to search, without having to do any clicks, and put in that piece of information. And it allowed for a simultaneous process of consulting and documenting. And if you think about the effects that had on the organization, it's incredible, because first of all, it meant that the consultants didn't have to put in any overtime anymore. The reports were done by the end of the day when they finished their last consultation. They also finished their documentation, their reporting. It improved data quality massively. The reports were complete. All the information that needed to be gathered was gathered, and it allowed for a smoother process after the initial consultation has been done. And obviously, it raised motivation with the consultants massively, because they got to go home when they were meant to go home and spend time with their families and friends.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really great example, because you get to understand the topic and the importance of the topic, and it also has some great impact on the people. We already talked about current trends and events in the beginning. I would now like to look into the future. What do companies have to keep an eye on in the next years, and what can they do to stay competitive?
I mean, as I said in the beginning, there's certain technological developments that companies need to keep in mind, such as artificial intelligence. Perhaps to raise another example, it's the way we work changes. Users are often not only focused on one exclusive screen anymore. They expect the work that they've been doing on their laptop in the office then can be continued on their tablet, on their smartphone as needed. And I think if you go even further, it'll become increasingly important that we move away from one exclusive screen and immerse ourselves into the experience through virtual reality, through augmented reality, through extended reality, so that we don't just work on a screen anymore. We work inside an experience, and that's really the best way to call it, because it's not just software anymore. We experience it around us in a very real way. But I think even more important than these specific technological developments, it is that companies need to keep up with the pace that things are developing. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation, but things that happen so quickly. And so you constantly need to be able to identify trends and developments and understand, are they relevant for me? Are they not relevant for me? And the only thing you can do that is by talking to users and to keep open channels of communication to understand, is this trend something that will help my users, or is this trend something that is not relevant to my users at all? Mm-hmm. And you don't just need to keep up to date with current trends. You need to look into the future. You need to do some foresighting, because if you're only jumping on the bandwagon all the time, you will always be behind. Mm-hmm. But by understanding what happens in the future, and by understanding certain developments and being able to interpret them in the way that you can be ahead of your competitors, that will increase your chances of success massively. Bearing in mind that not every development is relevant to them, and not every trend might be relevant to them, but they can really become a a trendsetter themselves rather than just constantly running behind. And perhaps the last thing I want to say about this is that whilst it is important to monitor current trends, it is important to look into the future, to do foresighting, it's also relevant to find the balance between embracing these trends and breaking away from them. You know, it's you don't just have to be a copycat and jump on every trend that's out there, but sometimes you need to make the conscious decision to say, I'm breaking away from what's normal right now and I'm trying to do something new. And that allows you to massively jump ahead of your competitors, because now you can be the trendsetter. Now you can do something different, and perhaps your competitors will do the same a few years down the line, but you've got such a massive advantage as you consciously break away from certain trends. And that's a very difficult balance to find, but it's a very, very important balance to find in order to stay competitive and successful.
Yeah, I get it. So it's not that important to follow every trend and to know every trend, and that's of course not possible, but you have to know what trends are important for you as a company and try to stay proactive there and try to shape the future yourself.
Yeah. More importantly, what's important for your users rather than your company.
Sure.
Your company needs to embrace the trends that your users need, expect, and are excited by.
Okay, thanks so much for your input and for being with us today, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this insightful journey through the world of UX UI design. To stay updated on upcoming episodes and share your topic ideas, make sure to follow our channel and leave your suggestions in the comments below. Your input is highly appreciated. Until next time.